7:04. Roll call, Katie Dugan,
Katie Dugan, present.
Chris
Chris Fleisch, present.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, present.
Ralph Dormitzer,
Ralph Dormitzer, present.
Susan Franklin, present. All right. Pull up the agenda here.
So did everyone receive the email today with the update on free cash and
Yes.
the certified retained earnings for water and sewer? So that's official. It's the official number.
Yay.
Got a lot of money flying around there.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. So that is the first item on the agenda is the update on the free cash. So everyone did get the email. Did anyone have any thoughts or comments on that?
I think it's great news. It's sort of a bellwether year at almost 1.9 million. We're appropriating, call it 500,000 and change at special town meeting. So that leaves $1.3 million that will go into undesignated fund balance, which is a big number to sort of go into undesignated fund balance. We had asked that there'd be a line item put in one of the warrant articles. I think it's Article 3, to appropriate some funds to capital. I think the line item was slotted at 50,000. Last week, Chris had given me the heads up about the number, and I tried shaking him down for a bit more towards capital. And unfortunately, I think I got him to 100,000, up from 50. And again, the thing I don't like about this is just the precedent of having only 100,000 go to capital when we know it's traditionally been one of the sources of funding for the capital stabilization. But if 100,000 is all we can get, then 100,000 is all we can get.
Yeah, I mean, the question is how is this going to be spent? Like if this is there, and I really haven't heard the select board talk about it, or if there's really any policy goal when it comes to, what now this money is available is going to be spent on. Obviously, we've got the update on the RTF. The operators of the RTF is going to chew up, some amount of money, but this is still free cash, and what's going to sop it up. And at the same time, we have the Osgood roofs that are going to come in front of us for another $100,000. Like there's a lot of stuff here that it's not necessarily that we want it to be transferred to capital, but just some sense of priority on how we execute on some of the priorities with this amount of money, because this is a meaningful amount of money. And putting it in capital only ensures that we can execute more on what we're looking to execute on, the whole town is, and it doesn't get sopped up by other things. So that's, it's really not so much about us as it is ensuring that it's put somewhere else. So that's neither a question nor a statement nor anything. But I think that's where my head is when it comes to why I'm uncomfortable with this amount of money in free cash just kind of sitting around. But that's that.
I mean, the financial policy does clearly state that undesignated fund balance can only go 3 places. It can go to a stabilization fund. It can go to one-time expenses. And I forget what the third is, but like, it's pretty limited in terms of like where the money can be spent. It's that one-time expense or, non-recurring that I think is where we've often spent big dollar sort of project money out of that undesignated fund balance. So.
Michelle, is there anything to share on priorities of that money and discussions at select board level or town manager level?
No, I don't know that this has even been presented to the select board yet.
Okay.
It came in Friday, and just the way the sequence of the meetings are, I think you're hearing it first. Ellen is in the audience, so she's hearing it as well. I'm sure Chris
Okay.
shared it with her. But there'll be more discussions at the select board level once they do their financial review.
Michelle, is there any chance that a lot of it's already been designated as part of the special town meeting? Usually that's where a lot of it goes. Nothing?
No, only about 500,000 or so has been designated at one-time costs.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
That
our
was
issue,
because
Ralph.
we didn't, Ralph, that was because we didn't have a certified number. There was a sort of a hesitancy to appropriate in the warrant as it was being written, because we didn't know what the final certified free cash was, because we're behind the 8 ball in terms of just getting the books closed.
So that means, yeah, there's $1.2 million of free cash that's not going to be appropriated. That's just kind of hanging around,
okay.
doing stuff, which is not typical, as you know. So,
I mean, I guess I would love to see the number go from 50,000 to 100,000 in Article 3 at a minimum. If it went to 200, I'd be thrilled, but again, I feel like I'm negotiating against myself but
Well-
again, I think there's a precedent of having a 6-figure number versus 50,000 for a
well,
capital.
well, our pitch is we're not spending it now. We're going to use it later on, right? So
Yeah.
I think this committee's pitch is, if you put it in capital, we can go execute on it. We don't have to do another transfer ahead of time, right? I mean, it doesn't have to come out of the one-time expenditures. It can go through a proper process, and we can, we're happy to spend all the money they give us, right? So, I mean, that's, we can also be more flexible about it. So I don't see a downside to doing the transfer, because then we can execute on it. So I mean, if we know what the dollar figure is, I don't see why the transfer wouldn't be really large, outside of the fact that it's a little bit, the warrant's going out, and then the motion on the town meeting floor is going to be much larger. But again, if the message is we're just going to spend it later, then I think that's a better way to go than trying to have all this stuff go through one-time costs, which is just going to be kind of confusing to people, because it's going to be, why are we spending $1.4 million of one-time cost money? It's just going to be kind of odd. So, I'd like to see whatever's going to go towards a capital project get transferred to capital. That way we can execute on it. And Ellen's listening. That was a speech for Ellen.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay, well, I guess overall, it's great news that the free cash is A, certified, and B, big. So that is the good news on that one.
And I'm glad we got it done this, not the week before or 2 weeks before, which is great.
So I guess, Michelle, if you can carry the message back that we would love to see Article 3 line item be raised, that would be amazing.
Have it in bold right here, 50 to 200.
Give us the money so we can spend it.
Yeah, again, it's we know that there are some things coming down the pike that are going to need assistance.
I'm just looking at the select board agenda to see if they've got it. Blah, 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 blah. Warrant updates, select board STM. Okay, they've got a special town meeting review warrant for any updates, kind of a big, but there's not a specific capital budget free cash item. So I will work with, or what, Susan, if you want to work with Ellen to see if it's useful for us to deliver our budget message, our priority message to the select board directly. We can sort that out.
Okay.
So do we want to go through the open items on the capital projects? I found that spreadsheet a little confusing to look at.
I was gonna, I haven't had a really chance to kind of really dive into it hard, but I'd love just a kind of a 50,000 foot walkthrough, if you don't mind, Michelle, to just kind of say,
Sure.
hey, this is how we read it, this is how we organize it, and then I'll have the context to understand it.
Sure. And I didn't have time. Our accountant wasn't in today, so I
Yeah.
pulled these reports myself. Typically, she'll pull them, I'll throw them in Excel and they make more sense.
Yeah.
But just on a quick overview, anytime you see there was a Fund 31 and Fund 32
Yep.
folders. Fund 31 is a borrowing. Fund
Yeah.
32 is cash. if you look at Fund 32, it just has a list of all of the items that were approved in the prior years. And the money spent against them. So if you look at the Fund 32, and you look at tasers, you'll
We can
see.
bring this up for Chris, because I'm not sure Chris
Yeah,
has this.
Sure. Yep.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And sorry, and Michelle, we're gonna work on the the FY 2026 request folder from now on. That's kind of where all this stuff is. Is that,
Yes,
have we
sorry.
made that transition? Just
Yes.
work, okay, gotcha.
We have,
Thank you.
sorry.
No, it's fine.
Would have been good to tell you. Sorry.
I mean,
I was clicking.
I did go through this afternoon, and there were definitely some things that jumped out to me. There's about $500,000 dating back to 2021 that the schools haven't spent. There's another 200 or 150,000 that IT hasn't spent, and some of it, I mean, the bigger stuff dates back to 2023, but there's like some change in the couch back to 2013. And then, road work and DPW, when I added that up, and again, I was only looking at the big ticket items, there's more change in there. But on road work and DPW, there was another $200,000. The biggest one, there was
Right.
the salt shed.
And that money is being spent as we speak.
Okay. And that's where like we have to sort of go through here one by one, because some of it may be in process.
Right, yeah, even, there's Bound Brook and there's Border Street Bridge, there's a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
So like, that was part of my, I think, Katie, you understood this quicker than I did. So, go ahead, Michelle, sorry.
Yep. So, just for instance, you see the tasers, you appropriated $12,355. The amount expended was $12,355.12. So we were over by 12 cents in that account. Police cars would be your next line item. You appropriated $124,000 when all was said and done. So we're also going to see here. See, this is confusing only because there are items in here, now that I'm looking, that are charged to this line item that
Right.
shouldn't have been. And this is where our accountant comes in and has to journal entry these out.
Yeah.
So by us looking at this tonight actually gives me,
We're not in deficit, basically.
we're not.
$60,000.
It just has to be transferred out to the correct account.
Yeah.
So the backhoe loader, sad story. You appropriated $145,000. We spent all of that. Just so you know, the new loader is $249,000. Same loader. We just got the quote the other day. EDM software, this is something where you're seeing there's still money that's been unspent. Anything that's encumbered has not been spent yet.
Can I ask you a question about encumbered?
Yeah.
Because this is one where typically encumbered means that you've got a PO that you're like holding it against. But in some cases for IT, they have encumbered appropriations that date back 5 or 6 years. There's no way that a PO is holding open. So I look at the encumbered number and I'm immediately a little suspicious as to like, is it really being spent, or did we just basically say we were going to spend it?
Yep. No, that's a great question, Katie.
Yeah.
And we encumber the funds immediately, secure the PO, right?
Yep.
Against the purchase. If in fact the purchase doesn't come through, the exercise at the end of the year for each admin is to go through all of these encumbrances and work with the department head to see if in fact the encumbrances are going to be spent. Sometimes money's encumbered and then someone goes and pays the invoice without the PO that's encumbered. So there's all kinds of different triggers here for the accounting department. And until someone actually outlines it for all of them, they can't journal entry to fix it all. But in this case, the MCCI, the encumbrance, I believe that can be closed.
Meaning closed, meaning that it has been spent.
meaning that you'll get your money back.
Oh, we'll get it back.
Yep.
Okay.
The fuel depot, that has been a carryover for many years now. So this fuel depot, the additional money, the $2,400 is to install those O-rings in all the vehicles.
Yeah.
This was just left over for any new vehicles that were purchased to be able to continue the installation. So that's what that money's for.
But so we're basically holding the $2,400 in perpetuity and,
Essentially.
okay.
Milliken Field Shed.
Yeah.
So
Got some
this
money
one
left there.
we've spent down.
So we could again, I'm just testing it here, Michelle, like theoretically, this $819 could be turned back to capital.
Yep.
I mean, this is where, again, like, I know it's changing the couch, but like,
No, $1,000 here and there, all of a sudden you're talking real money, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whatever the Yogi Berraism is. Yeah.
And like I said, with some additional time, and I didn't have it today, I apologize, but I can dump this into Excel and give you a column that says money that must stay encumbered and then money that can be turned back. And there will, you'll see significant turn back.
Is that usually your desk, Michelle? That's somebody else's desk that does that.
Not my desk. It's
Okay.
typically the accounting finance department,
Yeah, right. Okay.
but
All
we're a
right.
little lean, so I'll take it on.
Okay.
like the EDM software.
Yep, so that's a work in progress. I would have to talk to Ron about that because right now that's showing a negative, but once again, when I'm looking at it, I see something that was charged here for $12,000 that should have been charged elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the negative's there, and the rest of it is just encumbered and held
Right.
for 18 months, which is again where, like, in my mind, it's sort of the question you were asking, like, are we gonna do the project? If we're not gonna do the project, the money comes back. If
Mhm.
you're gonna do the project, do the project.
Right, right. The road work, there's nothing left on that. PPE. This was for the fire department. I believe you're gonna see a turn back there, because I believe they ended up getting grant money
Yep.
for additional turnout gear, so that'll come back to you.
Yep.
Electrical upgrades at Lawrence Wharf.
That's from 2019.
Yeah, we have to talk to Lori about this because I think the electrical upgrades, she was gonna come back before the board and see if we could transfer that to Government Island. Because initially the conveyor was going to go at Lawrence Wharf and then they decided it was gonna go at Government Island, and that's what those upgrades are for. Roadworks, seawalls, culvert,
Some big money.
yeah,
Yeah, so
those are.
we-
those
yeah,
are
Culver,
bigger
we just
money.
haven't done anything since 2020.
No,
Okay.
Is that the culvert near St. Anthony's?
yes.
Yeah.
So here's another one.
Yeah,
The school
this-
air handler
It's been going on for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
for years.
Yeah.
We put that out to bid 4 different times and we couldn't get a bid on it.
Can we get that back and then we can wrap that up into something bigger? You know, since now we're going through MSBA. Like,
Yep.
let's just abandon this effort completely.
I think it's time.
Yeah. Okay.
You have more road work. The
Yeah, this
salt,
is just the one where they're negative, but
yeah,
are we really negative or the?
Oh. nope, you're not.
Yeah.
You have your salt shed.
Is that in process, you said?
So yes, it's been a work in progress. They're still working on the lighting.
Oh, salt
Um,
shed? Oh, I thought that was largely wrapped up. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's still some items that need to be completed there. Brian owes me a list of what needs to be completed, but as soon as I have it, I will share it.
And you're using Jimmy Clark, so that explains a lot. Okay.
And I don't think it's gonna be $82,000 worth
No.
either.
Yeah, a lot of electrical work.
So Sawyer Street basketball courts, largely, I think that's gonna be a turn back. Those courts
Yep.
have been completed. Osgood sprinkler heads.
from 2021.
Yep, I think that's gonna be a turn back. The beach,
Is that, like, I'm trying to sort of, in my mind, like, it looks like none of the money has been spent. Was it a project that we decided didn't need to get done or got done?
no, so the problem with that one is they paid for it out of the facilities budget instead of the capital accounts. So it was a wrong processing, but at this point, it was so long ago. I mean, just turn
Yeah.
back the money. It's already been
Yeah.
spent. We've already
It's,
spent it.
it's easier to turn it back to us and redeploy it than it is to correct the journal entries, basically.
Exactly, exactly. Beechwood Courts, that money is being spent now. The middle high school HVAC system, once again,
Same thing, sitting
it
here for a
back.
while, not doing anything, can't do
Okay.
anything, okay?
I mean, that's big. I mean, the one that worries me just a little bit, just given the magnitude of it. It feels, Corey, this feels like something that we should at least have a conversation with the schools about, because it was almost $480,000.
Michelle,
Yep.
would it be, can we like do a little, small sub meeting with myself, Katie, Nick, and whoever from the schools?
Sure.
And the other context is, Katie and myself sat down with, Craig and the superintendent and Sue,
Owen.
Owen, thank you. And basically said that they wanted to, if Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the message we were getting from them is they wanted to be more involved on the front end of these conversations rather than the back end. So if we're going to be talking about these things and that they're stuck, or that how do we execute them, or is there a better way to do it? I think we should loop them in now, rather than just us talking about it with Nick behind the scenes.
Sure.
So if we can do like
Sure.
a sub meeting, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's great. But this is another case of putting it out to bid. This one went out 3 times, no bid.
Yeah.
Milliken Field concession, that one's all wrapped up.
Yeah, doing great.
Track replacement, you'll see here, so you're in the negative, but if you take that against your turf replacement,
Total project cost. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
The doors, there's nothing left there. Science lab plumbing, that's completed.
Do you think that they just charged the wrong account?
Yep.
Okay,
Pilot technology completed.
so we'll take the turn back and move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
What
when
about the electric bus? That was like 20, sorry, this is different. That's pilot technology. That's only
Right.
$16, sorry.
I can give you an update on the bus though.
Yeah,
There's-
okay.
There's a lot going on with that.
We also underfunded the bus because it was a half year for this year.
Yep.
So yeah, there shouldn't be like too much money sitting around.
There's $25,000.
Yep, that was for a full year. $25,000 is the yearly lease payment. So this year, to make up for the fact that we never spent the 25, what did we allocate? Only 7,500 or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll see if we pay anything out on that bus, where there's some conversations happening. Replacement of the defibs, that came in higher than expected.
Yeah.
Data center upgrades, Ron has been plugging away at this actively, so I think you can see all this, the spending.
Yep.
So July of 2023 to June of 2024, and he's actively spending that today. We have the Chromebooks, that'll come back to you, the $667.
Woo.
The furniture is overspent. The annual road paving, as you'll see, that is,
Wow.
That is just an account I don't want to put too much brain effort
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot.
Well, it's actually, I mean, for once, they've actually journaled out a lot of the detail.
They did. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all,
Turnout gear here, again, you have $14,000 left. Once again, there's grants available for this, and if they can pull them down, they do. So I'll see if this money can be turned back. Your smart panels, they spent all that down.
great.
iPad replacements, you'll get your 670 back. You're up to 1,200 with the schools. And this is another IT item that is being actively spent. Police cars, you'll get that turn back of $639. PPE clothing. I'll have to talk to Chief Dockeray about this. It appears that you should probably get that back. The furniture, you'll get that $650 back. The HVAC at the DPW, you'll get the $200 back. The van replacements, that's new. We're waiting for a van. We placed an order in early August for the CEA van replacement. For a
Oh,
20,
we got all those. Okay.
yeah, for a 2024 van. They just got back to us on Friday and said, sorry, no 2024 vans are available. You have to
Goodness.
purchase a 2025 and here's the increase. So, Bob Sylvia has been actively working to see if he could source it elsewhere. And I think he came up with a solution, but we just have to figure out from a procurement point of view if it's something we can actually do or not.
So, I mean, this was appropriated 2.5 years ago. Sort of what's the lag in terms of the actual purchase?
Yep, so a typical van purchase is taking anywhere between 12 and 18 months.
Okay,
By van, not like a minivan, you mean the big ones that have
Yeah.
the, yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
More
like
the-
a
more
transit
the
van that they
buses, yeah.
convert. It's a
Okay.
transit van that they convert into a bus essentially.
okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
Network switching upgrades, there's no money left there. Sorry. I think you're gonna get all this $18,000 back. I believe that was completed. That was the mini split in the nurse's office.
Yeah, that was, they did that work to sort of like change the configuration. Is that just an example where the money got taken out of facilities budget?
I think there was a lot more allocated. I think you allocated almost $30,000 for this project, and I think it came in a lot less, if I'm remembering correctly, but I will check with Nick.
Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna say, yeah.
yeah, this appropriation is just saying the split for the AC. Yeah, I remember the bigger number, but I don't, anyway. Okay.
This is just saying it was converted from that year, so whatever was left over in the account, they converted over to
Oh,
Oh,
carry.
right, the
okay.
converted from, yeah,
Yeah.
I missed it. Yep, thank you.
Oh, I see, the converted
Oh,
from,
sorry.
okay.
I,
Yeah, because it wouldn't show the inexpended because it was expended.
in a prior year, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
I'm not even sure what this one is, to be completely honest.
The mobile base station.
Yeah.
Sounds like a base station that's mobile.
So we'll,
$37.
the loader,
Yeah.
I don't know why there's $20,000 in. I think because there's a shortfall above, so I think that's where we're seeing the $20,000 here. So I think total project cost, I think you're even. But when we dump it into an Excel spreadsheet, we'll have a better idea.
Okay,
Garage door replacement, 5,800. That project is long gone. That has been done for years, the way I understand it. So that'll come back to you.
Okay,
Road
almost
pa-
paying for that new loader.
I was about to say the,
Yeah. We're getting there.
we're winning in the general ledger.
Yeah, police station roof. I believe that's coming back to you. And I do have an update under,
Converted from,
it's converted from, because that was the money left over, was over appropriated. The bids came in less and
I would love to highlight this stuff. I mean, just the conversation we hear all the time is that everything comes in over budget, and the normal things about the town doesn't account for spending or expenses and blah blah blah. I mean, a lot of these things are more ideological than they are based in math. But to come up with a number to say, due to how we source things and whatever, there's $150,000-$200,000 that we're able to reapply to new years, and congratulations. I mean, it'd be nice to kind of give the town that little pat on the back
yeah,
to make them feel better.
And you're right, Corey. I think often people think, oh, well, you gave them the money and they're just going to spend it on whatever, but we can't. So it just sits in these accounts, and you're right. If we don't go through this exercise and turn it back, it's not doing anyone any good.
yeah.
Correct.
So the locker mechanisms, we were over in that. Chromebook leases. You're gonna get that back. Treats Pond. I would have to regroup with Brian on that. I feel like that's an ongoing effort. But I'm not
What,
really,
there's one from 2013, Michelle.
That's the one.
So that's the one I had circled that
Right.
and I was like, there's no way, I'm like, something, I know it's a converted from.
But it's been converted for 11 years.
Right,
yeah.
yep, yep.
Color me skeptical on that one.
At this point, it should convert into a revolving fund or something else.
Yeah, well, the good news, it's still there, so we can always turn it back. There's permitting software, it's all been spent.
But no, Michelle, on that one, it's
Okay.
encumbered 4,500 and it's from 2013. I think we can declare the PO.
Yes, we can, yes,
Yeah, declare
that can be a null
appropriate.
and void PO, yeah.
Yep. Just
Yep,
get it out
we-
of here. Yep.
Get rid of that
Saves us a
one.
page.
The Treats Pond again, we'll get with Brian on.
That's from 2015.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. HVAC upgrades.
Where?
I don't know. That is a great
It's a
question.
converted from again.
Yeah,
But only from 22, so she would know where that money was.
was
yeah,
supposed to go.
I'll have
DPW
to look.
department.
$10,000. Oh, if memory serves correctly, I believe the DPW needed additional funding for their mini splits.
Mhm.
Ralph, does that sound familiar to you? I
Yeah,
feel like
it
you were
is.
involved.
Yeah, we had come up with about $20,000, I think, originally, or that we had come up with 20. They came up with 30, so I think it was closer to 30 they actually spent, but I can't remember exactly. But they definitely spent more money than we allocated. And so, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll check into that one.
Right.
The school vestibule is down to 0. Here you go, Katie. This is the electric school bus. We have not paid anything. There's a lot going on with the electric school bus. It's not on the agenda to really talk about.
Yeah.
But we should probably add it to the next agenda so we can have a robust conversation and invite the schools as well, as to, what we're gonna do with that electric school bus. Because it's been funded here for 25,000 and an additional funding this year. I don't know if we're gonna spend that or not, and I think we'll have a better idea by the end of the week.
Okay.
The public.
It was like 75,000 last year.
I think it's only been 25,000 from a capital perspective.
Okay.
I'm not sure, though. I would have to look back. The public safety generators down to 0, Milliken field studies down to 0.
It was 90,000.
The school bus,
Yeah.
for the electric school bus, that's
No,
for all
that's
the
for all
Oh,
of
no,
them.
7,000, sorry, wrong line.
Right.
Oh.
7,000 it's 25,000 a
It's
year,
25,000.
but we
Okay.
only, yeah, as Susan's saying, right.
Okay.
And then we have the Beechwood playground repairs. We'll get that back. Milliken, and that's it. And Milliken's down to 5 cents. So,
Milliken field study is 25,000.
Milliken field study, I have 0.
It's encumbered. It's not.
No, I think you're reading all of the articles come to 25,000, and that's primarily driven by the electric
Oh,
school.
I see. I gotcha. No, I'm sorry. You're right.
Okay. But like I said, I'll dump this in an Excel spreadsheet. I'll work with the department heads and see what can be turned back. So then we'll have, the town side, the school side, and then when you're going through the annual capital for all the department heads, they can speak to the money they have left over and why it's being turned back or why they need it.
Provide it to their department hands.
Yeah.
And so just brief on the electric school bus, since we previewed it a second ago. Have we spent anything with them at all?
No.
Okay.
Nope, the only money that was spent with them was through Mass CEC.
Gotcha.
And Mass CEC gave them, I think, $125,000 of grant money
Okay.
for the pilot project.
But we're
And
not out anything right now.
no,
Interesting. Okay.
And mechanically, Susan, like how has this been voted in the past? I remember Sam keeping a detailed spreadsheet of like turnbacks and the total dollars that you guys had. Was it just sort of, was it in the motion that was made at annual town meeting? Do you remember the mechanics for that?
I do not remember the mechanics for it. Do you, Ralph?
Yeah, I think it came back as a single number when we got through with it. He did go through the details, but they came back to us as a single number when we got through with it. But we knew the details, so. But we didn't spend a lot of time on it because, quite frankly, it was fairly automatic. So,
Mhm.
and Sam did keep a very good spreadsheet on that.
Do we have to unappropriate the money, or can we just reappropriate it if it gets turned back to us?
Well,
think
that's
it
what I'm asking. Like, is there a
Right.
motion that has to be made to like pull
Right.
it out and then put it back in, or how does that work?
I don't think we did. I think
Mhm.
it simply went back into our capital stabilization fund as a single number, but I may be wrong on that.
So we can add it to the bottom of our
Sam pretty
spreadsheet.
well did it himself, right?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Michelle, could you ask a question just on the mechanics of like, not that we're there yet, but at some point, is there a motion that we have to make when it comes to preparing for annual town meeting? But for now, just having a number is the most important thing.
Katie, I don't ever remember actually it being a town meeting vote, to be honest with you. I don't. May have been, but I don't remember it.
and
Yeah.
Ralph, while you're saying that, I believe the select board have the authority to vote it,
That's probably
right?
right.
But I will check. I will double check. I don't want to misspeak.
And it was weird, and the only reason I am asking the question is I was sort of refreshing my memory on school stuff a couple weeks back, and I was going through old warrants that I've got. And there was one warrant, and it was from like 5 or 6 years ago when Sam was running it, where it literally had like a lot of reappropriation detail. And it just sort of triggered in my mind, did we do it for any particular reason? Or were we just being more detail oriented in that year? I can dig up the language and send it around, but it was just sort of jumped out to me because it was different format in terms of the discussion around reappropriating money.
Yep. I'll find out tomorrow and send the group an email.
Okay.
All right, so the next item on the agenda are the capital liaison updates. Some people I know have been having some active meetings with their particular parties. Does anybody want to give an update on the things they're covering, or whether they've had an opportunity to meet with their parties?
I mean, I previewed it earlier. Katie and myself had a pretty good sit down with the superintendent, the business manager of the school, and the current chair of the school committee. And kind of hashed through all the normal topics. Largely, I think the main takeaway was just kind of keeping an active set of discussions going on, which, again, considering we're looking at Osgood and a change that's, I think we still have some work to do on that communication side. But trying to, we expressed that it's important that they own a lot of the projects and that they're on their support and that they've got a prioritization list, and reinforced importance of trying to build a 5-year plan of an understanding that a lot of the projects that we spent money on are already year 1 of 5, year 2 of 5, year 3 of 5, and just kind of getting all those on a linear kind of schedule, and then slotting in whatever new things they think are coming up, but really reinforcing the kind of the 5-year look ahead.
Yeah, and
Katie,
I think-
other stuff? Yeah.
They have a draft capital list, and it was super preliminary, like half the rows didn't even have numbers yet. So it was definitely a work in progress. We agreed to meet again right after Thanksgiving. So I think the meeting date now has been moved, Corey. There's a proposal to December 4th. So we'll
saw
meet
that.
again with the same group. the hope was at that meeting that they would have a better sense of what their total list looked like. And then they were going to begin to sort of, as internally amongst the school and the school committee, beginning to prioritize that. Obviously, there's a reoccurring set of expenditures around IT and bus leases, and then there's other sort of one-offs. We also had a good conversation about sort of what does a complete package look like. And so I dug back into the Wayback Machine and sort of gave them some examples of like, here's what we did on bus leases, to sort of substantiate, you know, here's what we did on IT. I actually shared with them Chief Quigley's packet. It didn't have any from last year. It didn't have anything that was sort of security related, but it's just a good example of packaged together, cover memo, context, the actual request form. So I think that was helpful, hopefully, to Sarah Shannon as she's sort of getting up to speed as to like, what are we looking for? Yes, we'd like the funding request form, but in addition to that, you have to sort of package it. And so I think Chief Quigley does a nice job of that. So we sent her that. I think the one thing that came up, which there's a renewed interest in some work around roads and asphalts and sidewalks. And we'll sort of see what comes of that. But I did mention that that was a program that had been funded in the past by capital budget. And Sarah wasn't aware of that. Craig wasn't aware of that, but that was something that was funded, I believe, in 2019 and 20, I want to say, or maybe it was 18 and 19. And so there was work that was done. So I sort of, again, sent them the work that had been done back then. So that may be another example of a project that had support that's sort of coming back to life in a phase 2. But I gave them what was done in phase 1, so they had the context. Yeah, but I think overall, it was a good first meeting. And we'll sort of see what the first pass of, you know, asks look like. I mean, even a half a list had already totaled up to $950,000. So there'll obviously be some conversations that happen.
Katie, I think you're raising a very good question as to what should a presentation look like, or what should a submission look like. I think the form we use is so minimalist that in fact you don't get all the data you want unless you specifically ask for it. So it would be terrific if at some time we would have an opportunity to really say, what do we really want in order to be informed about any particular purchase? That would really make a huge difference to us and speed up our process, I think, greatly by not having to ask quite so many questions.
Yes.
And certainly that's the way I've looked at it for a long time, that our current form allows people to just put in very simple, yes, we need it kinds of answers, but not necessarily provide any detail of why they do really believe it. So anyway, be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And again, I don't know if you
talking about that,
guys
the
remember
backup.
what Chief
sorry.
Quigley submitted last year, but again, it was sort of, they were simpler projects, but it was a nice package.
Right, like if you can get a copy of a quote, if they have one, any kind of letter or explanation of the project, or any kind of list of how the project is going to roll out. And I bring that one up specifically because the police department, you know, we always look for their list of what cars are rolling off and where they're going, and that practice has been adopted by the police department, and it makes that process go so much faster than what it used to go. Talking about, where did that car go? Where is that car? So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And
I think part of what we were encouraging them, and they had sort of the same, instead of going, you know, 5 rounds, like collecting information, Corey and I sort of suggested that if we could work with them to kind of get their first draft of the packages done, then hopefully we'll be able to help them get to sort of 80% of the information that the rest of the committee is looking for, preview it, and then when they come before us as a full committee, maybe we don't have everything that everybody's thinking of, but it's most of the way there, to your point, Ralph, and you're not sort of scrambling to ask 100 questions. Maybe we're down to, 20,
Right. Okay.
The other thing, Katie, is are you trying to figure out when you talk to the school committee specifically about what is in fact the special purpose stabilization fund and what is in fact the general capital stabilization fund? Are you trying to work that out as well at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah.
You are, okay.
I mean, the short answer is I think the school stabilization fund is basically already gonna be spent on the Osgood roof. Like, for all intents and purposes. And I can share some scary news that I sort of bumped into on the MASBA website in terms of what Osgood may cost. Yeah, so the answer is yes, we're very cognizant of the two funds, but for shorthand right now, most of that school is gonna be used against Osgood roof replacement, which sort of puts the rest of the requests in competition with other town departments. And we were pretty clear that that competition exists in terms of like both them prioritizing and then our committee prioritizing projects against other departments. So it was good. It was a very good first conversation. The other thing that, you know, as these projects came up around sidewalks and paving, it sort of begs your question to Ralph around whether some of those projects could be charged against the road and sidewalk fund if we needed to sort of make room in
Correct.
capital budget. But again, there's no detail on those yet, so I can't really comment whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah, that has come up in the past, that conversation about whether it's really school or if it's part of the road project.
Yeah.
A lot of the work we did that you're talking about earlier was curb replacement, right?
Mhm.
Ralph? We replaced a lot of those cement curbs with granite curbs.
And there was a bunch of stairways, all those stairs that led up from the lower parking lot up to the administrative and then up to the front, those were redone. So it was also some cement work that was redone.
Yeah, I don't know if all of it was capital. I think they ended up doing some on their own. But
I think they did. That was my recollection too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Has anyone else had any sessions? I mean,
I've
I can
got-
tell you that
Sorry, go ahead.
Town hall, we've been actively meeting approximately every 2 weeks. And after a lot of conversations, we decided that, and this is in the warrant, that it made sense to have a study done about the future of government, because we kept getting back to.
Sorry,
know,
it's such a small question. Just, let's have a study on future of
Well,
government.
because we keep
Yeah, for
talking
2
about
weeks.
how we're going to set up how our government works, but nobody really was thinking about what's the government of the future really look like. And we also have more time to think about that, because just in terms of, logistically, if we were to, move forward on a project of some sort there, we'd have to kind of get in line behind the police facility anyways.
Yeah.
The town running two major projects at the same time would be difficult, in terms of the projects, but also in terms of the people. Where do the people go? While you're doing all this work. So that's kind of where we came out after a lot of conversation. And it was a great suggestion by somebody on the committee, and I think we'll learn a lot that we can work with.
So I've had a couple brief conversation with Ron at IT. There's kind of 3 big buckets that we should be aware of. One is kind of the easiest bucket, I think, for us is going to be a communications tower that's located in Wheelwright Park off Forest Ave. It's about $50,000. And obviously it's in, reasons for communications down to Rocky Beach, kind of statewide stuff. There's also a conversation that we would get some sort of lease funding for this, so it may be a revenue generating thing. Ron projects about $900,000, if I recall. I'm not quite sure who's leasing it from us. Is it the state, Michelle, or who's leasing it from us?
So it'll be different carriers.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, a bunch of people. Okay, so that's cool. That's kind of the easiest one I think for us to chew off. The two harder ones are going to be town-wide access point replacement for Wi-Fi. I think one of the frustrations, and back to the idea of having a long-term plan on really everything, is that Ron reports that the access points are end of life, which means there's no longer security updates for them, that sort of thing. So it's really a security exposure, but it also makes it hard for us to really balance how we do them. I mean, so he's quoting about $250,000 for all the access points around town to upgrade kind of the back end that goes to them, as well as the actual access points. And questions that I haven't gotten into, but I think we should include phasing, how long things are going to take, because to fund this whole thing would be, it's a lot of what we're able to appropriate if it's the full $250,000. And then kind of the third thing, which is connected to that, and this is where it's a little bit amorphous at this point, is the discussion about town-wide security cameras. The school's talking about it. The school's had a $50,000, thing in there. I think Nick at facilities had a few dollar figures as well. I talked with the director of elder affairs. She had a few $1,000s in there. So there's kind of like a couple dollar figures floating around in different departments about this whole town-wide push for security cameras. And it's not yet clear to me, and Michelle, please provide clarity if you have it, kind of who's driving the bus, or kind of who's conducting the orchestra on this one. So I'm not quite sure even what the scope of that's going to be at this point, because everyone seems to have their own silos. But I do know that Ron is kind of, I'll let you talk, Michelle.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Corey. So Ron is trying to gather all the data for all the departments. He doesn't want this to be in a silo. If it's going to be town-wide, if the schools are looking for cameras and CE is looking for cameras, the library is looking for cameras, he'd rather have it as a town-wide phased project. Because economies of scale, you get substantial discounts. So he's trying to get everyone to work together to tell him their needs, so then he can appropriately quote the jobs.
Right.
Because what it was happening, as you started to say, is, the library is looking for cameras, so they're going to Ron, and then, the schools are looking. So Ron is taking it on as a town-wide project for all the departments.
And, Ralph, you'll understand this, but, the discussion of if we're doing cameras and, new access points, getting new PoE switches that can handle, the data and the power requirements for all of that makes sense to do it all at once, right? If you're running, new wiring and new access points and, all that kind of rack back end, you want to be sure you do it once in the right way versus trying to have parallel systems.
Yeah, and I think also you really have to ask hard questions about this whole thing, and that my experience with this whole thing is most of those access points have firmware updates anyway. And the question is, why are we, is it, we got an antenna problem? Do we have a simple, a different protocol we're talking about? But firmware updates are the usual way to actually upgrade those things. So we need to talk a lot about why are we upgrading, and is it necessary to actually buy all new equipment, or can we actually do firmware? So those are the critical questions.
Yeah. We'll get into that. So that's the three kind of big things from IT. Nothing from sewer or water yet for 26 stuff.
I mean, we'll talk about RTF and DPW later in the agenda. I mean, that's really the only separate meeting that's come up that Corey and I attended, and I sort of looped Ralph in because Ralph and I are liaisons to DPW and facility. So I'll hold on that. I was going to reach out to elder affairs. I just haven't gotten around to it. So I'll put that on my to-do list just to introduce myself.
Okay.
Chris, is your back door open?
Mhm.
It looks like the door behind you is open. Are you freezing?
No. It goes
Okay.
it goes into another room here, Corey.
Oh, gotcha. It's like, start turning blue. Just falls off the face of the earth, goes
Yeah,
up.
I'm kind of in the same place, Katie. I've reached out to CPC, but I haven't actually had a meeting with them. And Chris, you and I are on recreation and police and fire. So
Yes.
we need to reach out to them. So why don't you and I find times that work for us and then I'll present them to them.
Okay, that'd be great.
And for fire, obviously the new annex kind of process, I think one concern that Brian had, Ralph had in previous budget cycles was with this annex, are we going to be expected to buy some equipment? And, you know, hopefully we get ahead of that conversation. So I would encourage you guys to talk about that a little bit. Set expectations.
So I can let you know that we were having meetings frequently as for the 135 Public Safety Building Fire Annex. Our next conversation is likely going to happen December 3rd or 4th. I'll invite you. If you can make it, great. If you can't, that's okay too. I'll update you, but we're going to get our first cost estimate on the building, which will be exciting. It's very preliminary because it's off a schematic design, not anything else. So just to give us a baseline to say, okay, we're way over, we're where we need to be, we need to make some changes. So, but I'll include you in that.
Great. Okay, so next steps and process for fiscal 2026. We kind of touched on this already.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to talk
Agreed.
about it further, or do we want to make a list of things that we think ought to be included in a budget request, or?
Michelle?
Yes.
Did we skip over the Osgood roof? I just want to make sure we get that vote in.
Oh, yeah, that's next.
Oh.
Yeah, we gotta
I'm
do that.
sorry, we did.
Yeah,
I wish we didn't have to.
yeah.
What's the new
so-
number?
Yep, so it's the 15 that you already voted, is still a good number for, and that's for the OPM. The next number is $100,000. So in total, we need 115,000. So we're gonna ask you to vote for $100,000, and that will get us through, schematic design development. I'll have to look at the email as to what else it offers, but this is the number MSBA gave.
From Nick. Yeah.
To be revoted. Let's see.
It said request for funding for OPM, $15,000. That, Michelle, you said we voted, so that's what's already in the warrant, correct?
Correct.
Mhm.
And then the second thing was 100,000 request for funding a design engineer for Osgood roof, and that was what came out from the MSBA, that we now have to fund that as part of the project.
Correct.
You know, I mean, I did click through and I sent the link around to everybody. I mean, 100,000. It looked like. It was sort of, for me, it was really hard. It was hard for me to look at. They have on that website each of the projects that they've funded and all of the backup and the specific budgets. And when I was looking at the feasibility side of things, it was looking like the feasibility for a project half the size was around $50,000. So the $100,000 made sense.
Correct.
Because they had done in 2021 2 roofs in Melrose for elementary schools, and they were both 30,000 GSF, and ours is 60,000, and the feasibility and engineering was in both those cases around $50,000.
Katie, is MSBA kicking in? How much are they kicking in percentage-wise, do you know?
Well, that is the $1 million question, Ralph, because what really blew my mind at the end of, so I sort of scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet. And again, they go through and they break out different roofing types, like ours is 50% shingle and 50% this,
Number eight.
polymer, the EPDM. And they break it out on the website by type, but like for a 30,000 square foot synthetic rubber roof, it was somewhere between, for just construction costs, between $1.1 million to $1.8 million. So if you doubled it for ours, like we're talking about at least $2 million. And the question is, what percent will they fund? So I don't have an answer for you, but it's an excellent question.
That's the question.
It is the question.
Okay.
And the reason it is the question is, we've got, after annual town meeting next year, we'll have $2.6 million or so. Well, actually now 2.5, because we're gonna take another 100,000 out, so we'll have $2.5 million in the school facilities fund. And if I was to hazard a guess, the total cost of the project is gonna be, at least 2 million.
Yeah.
Before we get anything from state funding.
Yeah.
So I have no objection to the $100,000 appropriation. I just have the question which Ralph raised around, are we sure we have enough money in the school facilities fund, in the school stabilization fund, with matching funds to cover the nut that we're getting into? And the answer is, I think so, but it's gonna be tight.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the short term that we can see, yes. In the long term, I think regardless of what we do, no, right? It's kind of, there's not enough long-term money to really tackle everything, but for what we have in front of us, there's plenty. So, we
Maybe, well, I think what we're just gonna drain, right? What I'm worried is we're gonna basically drain the remaining $2.5 million to do this single project, and then have to refund it over 1 or 2 cycles to get back to a balance again, where we could even take on another substantial project.
Yeah, we don't-
It's not like capital stabilization where you guys have always kept $1 million balance, so you're never down to zero. This feels like we may be in a situation where we're drawing it closer down to zero and then spending a year or 2 building it back up before we could do a major project. Maybe that's.
Well, but if we execute on the roof, we're then funding another budget cycle. And so, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong at all that we're kind of going to be a little bit of a bouncing ball with that account balance. But I also don't think we yet necessarily know what the next big nut is that's coming down the pike. Is it going to be it could very well be a $20 million project. It doesn't matter. Then what we have in the fund doesn't matter. Or it could be a $500,000 project. That's kind of what I was saying. The long term, we don't have enough clarity on the next kind of pieces that, we could either be completely screwed or be absolutely fine in the 5-year window based on how the next nuts come down the pike. And I don't think we have any clarity on what that's going to look like. So, but I also agree with you completely that, protecting what we have is a good thing. So
You have the option, if in fact you come up with a $20 million project, you can also borrow, obviously, against that fund. So there are ways to deal with, drawing down the fund for, a roof at Osgood, a roof at Deer Hill, a roof at the high school, for example, or a new HVAC system for the high school. You can draw it down, and probably ought to draw it down some. But then again, when you get a $20 million project, I don't think you want to go back to the people and say, gee, we got you a special purpose stabilization fund, which is supposed to cover all this, but unfortunately it doesn't cover it anymore. And that's not going to be a good look, I can tell you. So you really have to think about, where does borrowing actually fit in this whole picture? So that's the other part of it. So.
Yeah. We know that there's going to be another accelerated repair request for another roof coming in the near term. That was my only point. Like, setting aside the 20 million or the project that needs borrowing, there's 2 more roofs that are going to come down the pike very quickly after. And again, it's just, I think, to your point, I think we're gonna be drawing down and building back up and drawing down and building back up, but I didn't quite expect to draw down as close as this may be.
Well, I mean, this was part of the policy question we had about what really are we using the stabilization fund for? Is it to ensure we can accelerate things, or is it to take things out of things where it was doing damage, right? Those are two different perspectives. Because in one version of this, a conversation could be had about, okay, we need $100,000, but we're sitting on free cash. Let's appropriate some of that at special to get this done and protect the stabilization fund. That's a political discussion, right? That the select board needs to have. But if we're sitting on over $1 million of free cash, and yet we know that we're this kind of stuff is coming down the pike, then there's an argument to say let's spend free cash on what we already know is priorities and already things that are in progress.
No, you're right. I mean, we could in the spring choose to spend some of the free cash directly against that project, or we could choose to accelerate potentially funding into a stabilization fund. So I guess the good news is that we'll have at least that extra cash from this year. Okay. Well, I'm comfortable with the $100,000 request. Just so that we're all aware, we will have to have another conversation this spring or follow along once we know more about what the total cost of the project and what percent the MASB is going to help cost share with us.
So what's the motion look like, Michelle? Is it just to amend previous or new?
I think you can just have you can take a new vote for the $100,000 because you've already voted the 15. If you want to take a new vote for 115, you can do that. It's up to you.
Okay, and outside of Nick's email, we don't really have anything. I know, we're trying to establish some new sort of process here. We also haven't heard from the school. So I'm a little bit like stuck here where the meeting that, Katie and myself had with the schools was like, don't do anything without us. We're going to leave this, it shouldn't fall on Nick. And now here we are only with a Nick email for $100,000. So I'm a little like, I don't have an objection here, but I just feel like we're immediately violating the thing that we said we were going to do in the first place.
Well, if it's any consolation, so I spoke to Craig last week. He did say that this was coming to Capital. He did speak to Ellen regarding this very thing as well. So.
Okay.
I mean, I
We're
guess,
halfway there.
No, we're sort of there. This, again, just from a timing perspective, Michelle, this was in our inboxes, today. The first time that I became aware of it was today.
Right, but yeah, so
Yeah.
although, I don't know when Craig or the schools heard about it, but if we can
I think I talked to Craig last Thursday, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, can you, when those emails kind of go through, can you include us? Just kind of make it a habit since we're liaisons that way. Because if we had this, we had last Wednesday or what was it? Yeah, November 7th, right? So this is when the schools found out about it. So the whole conversation about us improving communication doesn't quite work if we're 11 days behind. So I'll get off my complaint box now. All right, I'll make the motion that we recommend spending $100,000 out of the school special stabilization funds for the purpose of a design engineer for the Osgood roof.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll
Chris
call.
Fleisch, aye.
Katie,
Katie Dugan, aye.
Corey,
Gray Evans, aye.
Ralph,
Ralph Domitzer, aye.
Susan Franklin, aye. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we touched on the capital budget requests, what we would really like to see in a packet. Katie, you mentioned that you shared a couple that you thought contained good materials. Maybe we can start with that and share it amongst us and use that as a baseline for the things that we'd like to see.
Yeah, I'll circulate the police packet from last year. The requests were $30,000 or $40,000 requests, so there wasn't like a lot of detail that was required, but it had the context, it had just
Back
a
support.
little bit of information. So I think that's sort of baseline for me, was like, this is like, any request should have this as a minimum, and then as you add more dollars and more complexity, you have to sort of get a little bit more nuanced in terms of like, what else will we want? But I think that police package, so I'll circulate that to the group, and people can, agree or disagree in terms of like, does that have enough? But I thought that was a good like minimum baseline, was what Chief Quigley presented.
And Ron at IT does a good job too. So in our
Yeah, he
2026 folder, if you pop in IT, the things that I just talked about the access points, it's
Mhm.
the form is well filled out. It's got detail, it's got background information, it's got the project scope, and then there's attachments for kind of all the quotes that add up to what the request is for.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good square submittal.
Okay.
And I actually think our form, it's got a lot of words on it, but it doesn't really like it doesn't really like have a checklist almost of like, do you have your invoice attached, quote attached, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a little more work to figure out what you should be attaching by reading that form, so maybe we can
And
simplify that a bit.
And Michelle, can we break up the IT cameras into its own folder? Because now they're all in their separate departments, and until we figure out where these all live, if we just put them all in one place, I think that'd be, I don't know if I have the ability to do that or not. I don't think I do. So
Susan, I liked your idea of having just like literally like a cover note. It's almost like I've been doing these college checklists with my son. It's like, do you have your, FAFSA? Do you have like, it's
Yeah.
often it's like, it's not, the funding request form is sort of, it's important, but it's one of several things that we would like to see. So I think just being able to articulate those couple things,
Yeah, like a closing list of not like a long.
Yes,
list, right?
exactly.
Anybody would have a closing list, and you have to have the
Yeah.
following things in order to close.
Yeah.
well phrased.
I'm happy to take a crack at that, Susan, and maybe send it to you for some comments, and maybe we could work on that offline and then
Sure.
bring it to the committee. Does that make sense?
Sure, that's
Or
fine.
just share it across, I would think, Katie. Whatever you have, why don't you share it with us?
Okay. I just didn't want people
Yeah, change. like
commenting
right
on
now.
it, but yeah,
Yeah.
one-way information, I'm happy to shoot it out to everybody.
All right, then, that leaves the update on the RTF.
So update on RTF. So there was a emergency meeting that was called last week to sort of continue the conversation around what happened. It was run by Cohasset Emergency Management, but it had basically all of the key town departments there. In terms of like the overall content of the meeting, a lot of what was discussed was sort of where are we today in terms of responding to the emergency. What I took away from it was that the town is moving very quickly on the insurance front, and so far no gaps have been identified in terms of coverages. We've hired a public adjuster who's jumped in and begun to help us prepare documentation in terms of property claims, the loader claim, as you referred to, Michelle. There's even a gap between what we purchased it from and what we're going to be buying a new one for. What I took away from that meeting, Michelle, was though that we're covered based on replacement costs, so we actually shouldn't have necessarily a cash expenditure that we're gonna have to, like, the gap is gonna be covered by insurance, if I was following correctly.
Yep, that's accurate.
And, you know, other good features, like even though we're having to rent a front loader, while we're sort of waiting, that, I forget the fee, it's something like $8,400 or something a month.
Yeah.
That will be covered by insurance. So our insurance is doing its work in terms of, sort of the gaps when it comes to the loader, and then we'll know more in terms of the property piece once that whole claim has been developed and submitted. The conversation sort of went from, you know, where are we today? I think the only other thing that came up was IT related in terms of the damage that was done to the fiber optic and the cameras that were at the dump.
Spent a lot of time talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, from a dollar perspective, again, covered by insurance, but you know, we're gonna have to replace a whole segment of our fiber optic cable because you can't just splice fiber optic, you have to go back to the junction. So there'll be roughly a mile of fiber optic that'll have to be replaced. It actually was a lot cheaper than I was expecting. It's like $20,000. So that's all well in hand is sort of my takeaway. The conversation then turned to sort of where are we headed in terms of the future. And it sounded like there was some nearer term visioning that was being done for what are we going to do on the side that was damaged in terms of the blue building that has the 3 compactors in it today, and then the paper and cardboard recycling. So the one specific request that I sort of heard developing in the nearer term around that was around self-compacting units, that we have 3 currently. One, which is new or relatively new, 2 to 3 years old, and we have 2 older compactors that are 20 years old, sort of end of life. The thought process was to keep the newer one and put that to work compacting paper and cardboard. And I think that was actually, they were talking about actually moving that and deploying that strategy on Monday of this week. And then the request for sort of the shorter term would be for 3 new self-compacting units that would be lined up and basically replace the guts of what's in the blue building today. And sort of the thought process there was that these 3 self-compacting units would handle, I believe one would handle plastic, another would handle tin, and then the third might be multi-use. Again, don't quote me on that. But the thought process was that we would have sort of a, instead of having a shed which had the 3 units in it and were sort of worked by DPW facilities workers, we would now have 3 self-compacting units that residents would drive up to and do the recycling on their own through feeding it into these machines, and they would round the corner and do the same thing with your paper and cardboard. You know, sort of early days in terms of envisioning, but that's sort of what was articulated at the meeting. The conversation then went to like, what do we do about the other side of the dump, and the fact that anything that we build or anything we do going forward now has to comply with OSHA at a municipal level. So there was some conversation around, you know, what could or should we do with the glass shed? What could or should we do with the trash, the trash recycling? It's not necessarily safe just to have a tennis net as your only protection from falling over into the bin. So that conversation sort of, what I would say is that, you know, what I had suggested was that there's sort of 2 channels of conversation. One, which is when we get to sort of insurance settlements, how are we going to reconfigure the side that was destroyed? And we will have money and funding to re-envision that, including both the sort of operational piece, but also the office and the DPW facility side? And then second, what are we gonna do with the existing side that wasn't destroyed by the fire? And do we want to re-envision a broader vision for the RTF? And that, again, is sort of a little unclear what the timeline would look like on that, but they are tied together. And so the thought process was that you would do the insurance piece first, but then have as a sort of in tandem conversation around what, if anything, you would do on the other side.
And for total requests, Katie, what the compactors were $125,000 for all of them. They were like $35,000 a
I
piece.
think with installation, it was 170.
170.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had 170 in my notes, so it was like, that, I think it was 3 times 40 and then
Right.
another bit to get to 170 for the installation.
And Michelle, just in the logistics of this, there's that declaration of emergency, so they can spend all this money to purchase capital items or whatever they need to redo it. We'll get insurance money. What are we going to have to do, if anything, on the back end to kind of close the books on this after they've spent this money? How do we wrap it up?
That's a great question, Corey, and I don't think we're there yet. I don't
Okay.
have an answer. I'll get with Chris tomorrow and talk about that. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Okay. Ongoing. I'm just wondering. Yeah. At what point do we have to do anything? Frankly. So.
Right.
Okay.
So is the basic boiling down here on this meeting? We're looking at getting these compactors and this equipment, putting it in the existing structure.
So the blue building is going to be demoed. The 3 new compactors would be open. I mean, they'd be enclosed, but it would be basically open air. So if you went to the Situate dump,
I did, yes. I was
you,
gonna say.
it's that same
Open the door,
concept
yeah.
of like you would drive up
Yeah.
to them. They have the space to basically have a big enclosed shed, so you can drive up and step out and do what you need to do at that compactor, with a roof over your head. In our situation, you'd be stepping out of your vehicle, approaching the compactor, doing what you do, and then, pulling up to the next station,
So
essentially.
the compactor is going to be out in the open air right now, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll be enclosed. The compactors themselves will be enclosed, but the slot that the residents utilize will be out in the open air. So you'll be standing, this will all be on like a cement pad. But the slot,
It's the existing cement pad. So basically, we don't have to build anything the way it is. We just pull these things up to where the existing are. We don't have that shed over it, but that shed only protected the workers anyway. You were still out in the air
Yeah.
with your stuff. So we just won't have anybody there, and there'll just be a door where you slide your cardboard and plastic into the chute, and then the thing does its
But we're
does its thing.
saying that this may be temporary, that they're out in the open like that, and at some point there might be something over them. Are they made to sit outside?
They're
24/7 like that?
they're made to be outside. They're self-contained. They're made to wear in the elements. They did pull one out today, so anyone that goes up there this week to dispose of their items, you'll be able to see or imagine.
Woo! Field trip, right?
So, we were talking about maybe being able to build a structure over, so people who are disposing of their goods, if it's a rainy day or they're not exposed to the elements. But that discussion is very premature. We're just trying to get the whole operation back online
Right.
first.
I mean,
There's a
sorry, go ahead, Corey.
Well, I was just going to say there's a broader discussion. And one of the questions that I had going into it was, to your point, Susan, are we talking what's the next generation, or are we just talking about getting the thing back up and running? We're definitely in the latter, not the former, where what do we need to just get this thing going again? And then the discussion about where do we go from here is going to be one that we're going to have down the line.
Mhm.
So the flip side also is I don't think any of the money that we're spending now is going to be bad money spent if we do something later in the future.
No, I hear you, because if you're just getting these units and putting them, on the pad for now, if down the line, the idea is to, put some kind of a structure, change the, sort of the flow of the place, then you're just gonna take those units and move them
Exactly.
into the new
Yep.
structure. So it's not
Yep.
money wasted.
Correct.
It's-
And I think you mentioned something that came up a couple times was this whole discussion around flow. Because right now we basically have parking in the center and
Mhm.
that is sort of the hub and you go out spoke wise.
Yeah,
The conversation was like, should we for OSHA and should we just for in general to make the operation more efficient, have like basically a line that you drive, a circle that you drive with limited or no parking, so that you would basically drive the perimeter to each of the stations and then drive out and exit. So a part of the longer term conversation, but whatever we buy now, theoretically could be kind of shifted,
yeah, move it around, yeah.
moving
That's how
around.
I've seen a lot of them.
Yeah.
Set up.
And
I don't want to be stuck behind some people. Okay.
Yeah, and something else that came up that we're working to address now is all of the youth groups that go up there.
Mhm.
As of right now, we had to pause that. Obviously, we can't have anyone up there that's not employed by the town. At least working up there that's not employed by the town, but we did get a schedule of all the youth groups that do take advantage of the RTF for fundraising efforts. So we're trying to work that and see how we can best help them. Because there's quite a few groups that rely on that for their annual fundraising events.
Yeah, Michelle, I just pitched to Vince, and this is not in our scope at all, but like, just like they do the Christmas tree pickup, rather than having kids walk around helping me get my bag from my truck to the thing, come pick my stuff up. I'll give you $20. So I don't have to make that run, right? So like and that also helps us with less people at the dump. I mean, if we can get, someone with a pickup truck with 40 bags, that's a lot easier than 40 people driving to the dump right now when it's all, so I pitched that to him and he was going to kind of connect to all the boosters and
Oh, wow. Okay.
Clever.
make
I think
in a morning, make all
Yeah.
that money.
I think the only other concept that sort of came up briefly was this idea of an enterprise fund for the RTF. And again, that's sort of part of the longer term picture of like, do you have an enterprise fund that makes the RTF sort of a self-contained operation?
Yeah, the RTF is a drag on funding right now.
Mhm.
So everybody's subsidizing trash disposal.
Except, in this case, when it's water and sewer, you have to have water, you have to have sewer. In the case of the dump, like I could equally choose to go out and have Graham Waste come to my house. So I think the concept of an enterprise fund is interesting, but if 50% of the people in town now use the dump, would you drop it to 25% if you made an enterprise fund and then you'd have fewer users supporting, an operation versus,
Policy question.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is a policy question, not our job, but definitely one that'll have to be considered. So,
Thank you for that.
And that
Pete.
concludes our garbage discussion for today.
yeah, exactly. So short term, I think we'll have some expenditures coming. Good news, insurance is gonna cover a bunch of the damage, and then the longer term conversation, the town is gonna have to decide how they want to organize that envisioning process, and what the requests are gonna look like coming out of that.
Okay. All right, then, does anyone have anything else that Michelle's got her hand up?
I do have one item that was not reasonably known because it just came across my email 2 minutes ago. We did conclude the roof bid for town hall. We checked references, we awarded a vendor, they have sent us back their notice of intent in their award letter, and they are looking to meet with us next week.
Great.
I think everyone can remember all the robust discussions we had regarding the price and how much it would cost. The low bidder came in at $92,750.
What a good,
Way better. Ralph, you called it.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the number. We're gonna have a pre-construction meeting next week. And I will update this committee when we find out more as far as how it looks for time frame. And they did indicate there'd be some disruptions at town hall, so we'll just have to see how that works out. But we'll figure that out operationally. But I wanted to let you know it came in pretty close to what Ralph thought it would come in at. So
Yeah.
Great.
Ralph is a good estimator.
Ralph gets a half a
Oh,
coffee.
so what's the Osgood roof gonna cost?
I got
Right.
a few other projects I could get you good prices on too.
Or if you can just manifest a number for us. Yeah.
Ralph, I'd love to hand over the procurement to you.
Yeah.
Don't be baited.
Never smile and never give away your position, right?
All right,
Oh.
then. If there aren't any other items, let's talk about the next meeting.
Yeah.
So 25th, the weekend of Thanksgiving. Is that all right? Is everybody gonna be able to do that on the 25th? Or do you think, Michelle, will have anybody who wants to even present to us that week?
That might be challenging. But let me see. Let me send out a note. You may get someone who wants to just, police usually is ready fairly early. So you may just want to knock them out.
Okay,
Next week, next Monday?
Yeah,
Is there anything of substance that's gonna be ready by then?
that's what I
well,
was
no, that's
asking.
what we're saying. Or if you don't want to meet next Monday, that's fine too.
Let's meet up. I personally
Yeah.
would rather meet on the 2nd, if that's okay.
Maybe that'll give us a little more time to get more than one party available.
Yeah. And the following Monday is special town meeting, so that would give us. I mean,
Right.
we could have 2 meetings in December. I don't know what you guys typically target, but having the potentially the 2nd and the 16th could work well.
Yeah, in case we need to clean up anything before STM too, on the 2nd, gives an extra week for
That's true.
oopsies, yeah.
That's a good idea. So let's do that, Michelle.
And also, Michelle, do you want to post us for the 9th just before? Do you always do that anyway as a practice? Okay.
Yep,
Just in
we'll
case we
do
need-
30 minutes ahead of time on the 9th.
Great.
That's the oh shit.
That's not oopsies, that's the oh shit, yeah, exactly.
The only recommendation I would have for everybody is that in view of the fact that we rarely have time to look at minutes, it would be great if in fact we could get to minutes more or less within a couple of weeks of the time they're prepared, so that the first thing we do is get rid of those minutes. I know there's going to be a lot of pressure from the clerk on this, and we probably ought to observe that. I think that's an important thing now to go do. That's one of the old processes we probably haven't done too well in a long time. So if we could pull that off, that'd be.
So
Yeah,
Right.
that, Ralph, that's great. If we could target maybe the 16th, Michelle, that we hit STM, and then we can wrap up all of our meetings for that STM on the 16th. So if you can connect with Lee and Tina, and if, you know, we have to plug in and just rewatch a meeting, make notes, I'm happy to do it. But let's try to wrap everything up on the 16th for that.
Sure. Yeah, I like your idea, Ralph, of like, if it's not every meeting, it's like every other meeting, we just as a standing item have minutes, and we try and we just try and stay on top of it.
That'd be great. Yep.
Okay, then let's formulate the agenda as we find out who's available.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, guys. Does
Thank you
anybody
all.
have anything else?
No. And Chris,
Motion-
we'll get you on OneDrive. I think that's sort of the critical thing, is to get Chris up and running on OneDrive.
Corey has been incredibly helpful with me already, but I need some more remedial work.
We'll get there.
I'm happy to help, Chris. So if you want to just give me a call, we can walk through it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then, does anybody want to give me a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Roll call vote. Chris,
Need it.
Chris Peisch, aye.
Katie,
Katie Dugan, I.
Corey,
Corey Evans, aye.
Ralph,
Ralph Dormitzer, aye.
Susan Franklin, I.
And give Katie the second.
So
What's that?
I said give Katie the second in the motion. I made the motion and
I
then,
seconded it.
yeah, I just, it wasn't verbal.
Sorry.
Emotional second.
It's the emotional one.
All right,
The
then,
implied
thank you so much for your time tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay.
Good
Yep,
night.
everybody
Thank
have a
you.
great Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
You as
Thank
well.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Right, thanks.
Bye-bye.